I'm Jeanne Pirtle at Historic Sotterley. Today we're going to talk about and explore the schoolhouse. Sotterley, in an 1802 inventory, which is a primary document, it states that Sotterley had a schoolhouse. And we know in the 1850s, 40s, 50s, and especially that there was a schoolhouse being run here. Of course, this was only for white children. Black children early didn't have school, and when they did, it was a separate school. There was also a Sotterley school in the early 20th century for white children that used to be up on Steerhorn Neck Road, and it still is there, but it's a private residence. Also, Phyllis Wheatley School was also a school for black children that is north of here on Sotterley Road before you get to 235. So it was farther away. So when we talk about going to school in the old days and in previous centuries, we know that not everyone got to go to a formal paid school, but we're going to talk about that too on our exploration today. So I wanted to show you some primary documents. How do we know that this building was used as a schoolhouse? Well, and also you might hear this being called the North Gatehouse, and we also have a South Gatehouse. But the South Gatehouse wasn't built to about the 1920s by one of our owners who liked symmetry. So he called these the gatehouses. But we believe this was used as a schoolhouse, especially for the Briscoe children. So I'm going to, here's a comparison of a census. And if you haven't studied the census yet, it is a census year. And what is the census? Where did we get the census? If you go to census.gov, they have wonderful educational resources right on the site. So find out about the census, and how your census will tell you a story if you look at the census. So here is the owner of Sotterley, Walter Hanson Stone Briscoe. And this is just a breakdown of the males, and they're talking about, these are all white people, remember, because enslaved African Americans weren't counted on the census till about 1870. So Walter Hanson, so there are 6 males, 10 females, with a total of 16. Now, the Briscoes had 13 children altogether, boys and girls. So that's a large number of females here. And then in 1850, there's even more, 13. Okay. So then the black population, and they get that from sometimes slave statistics and other tax lists, and depending on what the census, they might count how many females and males in the black population, but they don't give names. So here's the original document here, but someone has broken this down for us so we can read it very easily. So they have Dr. Briscoe, who's 49 years old in 1850. He was born in Charles County, we know. He's a resident of St. Mary's, and it shows all the neighbors here too. So the census is a wonderful document to look at. Okay, and their household. So they have Dr. Briscoe, his wife Emmeline, another documentation here that she was born in Pennsylvania, which is helpful. Their oldest daughter Margaret is 20. And sometimes the older Briscoe girls you would be teaching also. So we know that a couple of Briscoe daughters taught in the St. Mary's Female Seminary. Henry, and some of these sons also, when they were younger, would also attend the school. So Jeanette, here's Jeanette. So she's 13. right? And go down here. Look at all these girls. So these are all borders of the school. There's Sarah and Susan, and more daughters. But then you start having Rachel Thomas. You have Mary Blades. Now Mary Blades is the school teacher. Okay, she's born in Caroline County, Maryland. And Elizabeth Chloe Adams, Frances A. Johns, and Ann B. Webster. So there's several girls. So Dr. Briscoe ran a boarding school for well-to-do white girls, and most of these were even related to the Briscoes, either cousins or nieces or nephews. So they would come here and they would actually board in the house, and they might only go home for a week at Christmas, but they would be here the rest of the time. So today, our gatehouse, and you can see the Patuxent from here, and you can see the Colonial Revival Garden from here. So this is furnished today with late 19th century desks. So we're going to walk in. Now, remember, what's really important for girls of the 18th and the 19th century, especially wealthy girls, their education is based on the assumption that they're going to marry and have a family. And Dr. Briscoe wanted his girls to have some education so that they would be suitable wives. So that is still important in the 1800s. In the 1700s, if you were lucky, maybe you sat in on your brother's tutoring lessons. You did know how to read and write, but basically you were learning how to get married and run a household that include enslaved people, probably in your early teen years. The age was a lot younger for marriage, the earlier you go. But they're going to study a lot of subjects in here, but they're also manners are important. Your etiquette is still very important, and you would never want to embarrass your parents, or if you did something that was not mannerly or out of order, that would reflect badly on your parents, and you never would embarrass your parents. That was just not done. So students often ask one of the first questions, what did they do when they got in trouble? Well, they didn't get in trouble because that just was not, you wouldn't think of disobeying, but if you were out of line in any way, you probably wouldn't make that mistake again, let me just say. Strict upbringing from a very young age, and you knew exactly what you were supposed to be doing, right? And you would have respect for adults in both centuries, in the 1700s and the 1800s. You would usually never speak until spoken to. You would wait until the adult told you to be seated. So there was never really a mad dash into the classroom. Now today we're learning in different ways, right? Some of you may go to a formal classroom. Now you may be doing some classes online. You may be homeschooled. So some of this is going to be really familiar to a lot of you. And getting an education, it can be done in different ways. So we know from Agnes Kane Callum's oral tradition, she traced her ancestry to enslaved people in the 1800s, the Kane family. We know that one of the Kane boys, George Kane, according to Miss Agnes's oral tradition and history, waited on the schoolhouse. So he was an African American enslaved boy. Okay, so he wasn't allowed to go to school, right? here. He wasn't allowed to go to school. But he would stand out waiting to be tasked with either getting water or firewood or whatever Miss Mary needed for the schoolhouse and the girls. And he's standing out here or sitting out here waiting to be tasked. And what is he doing? Let's think about, what is George doing out here besides waiting? Why don't you stop and think about that for a minute? What is George doing out here? Okay, are you ready to go in? Okay, I see you're all in a line. So I will go in first. You will follow and stand by your desk until you're told to be seated. So these are late 19th century furnishings. You can see it has a place for an inkwell, right? Because you are probably still dipping a metal ink pen point into the ink to write on paper. Of course, early on, paper and books are very expensive, so you're not going to waste. So you might use a slate to write down your ciphers, which the math, right? Your math problems, or your spelling. And you're going to have children of different ages in the same school, right? You're going to have one of the Briscoe daughters just learning to read and write, and you're going to have teenage Briscoe daughters that are really ready for college, and they could teach the school themselves by now. So how do you run a classroom? Well, those of you that have done this before, of course you're not having the students work on the same thing. So you might have a group of younger children learning their ABCs, and they might use something like this. This is an alphabet paddle, so it gives the numbers and letters so that you can copy them down with a little poem. And of course, any kind of literature, if it teaches a moral or some kind of behavior that we want to instill in children, all the better, right? So this says, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. And this is, of course, from Colossians in the Bible, right? So children obeying their parents, very important. As I said, it wouldn't really occur to you to misbehave most of the time. So you would have these children over here writing their letters, and you might have the older children over here reading literature, studying nature, studying Latin, studying French. So if you wanted to quiz the class, and these are old books, right? And you can see how small, we have a Bible in here. You can see how small the print is, right? History of England. So we're learning history. We're learning geography. We're learning languages. We're learning science, both physical science and life sciences. You're learning about astronomy. All of these subjects you're going to learn in this Blade school. Okay, so I might ask you a question like, so I have the students over here just learning to read, so I might ask them a question. I want you over here to think of all the words that you can think of that rhyme with cat. So you over here work on all the words, listing all the words you can think of that rhyme with cat. And I might ask some of the older students, name the countries that have French as their prominent language. So that would be a geography and a language question altogether. So that's, and then you might be practicing your Latin over here. So you would be doing different things at different times, and the older children would be tasked with helping the younger